Extra scene. People say in order to succeed properly, one must research intensely on their respective field. So, here I am reading a romance novel in order to perfect and relate to my piano tunes. But I think I chose the wrong book. Emily brushed her silver hair towards the back and looked out the windows. Love triangle. Does something like that really happen in real life? She gave a silent smile through her thin lips and muttered to herself in a soft voice, but if it's true and happens to me, who would I choose?
Akumah Audiobooks.
You are listening to This Tune of Love Isn't Quite Right. Written by Akumah and voiceover by Sara.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Chapter 1, Prelude in G minor. The concert hall buzzed with muted whispers and soft rustles as townsfolk settled into their seats, the faint scent of old wood and polish mingling with the crisp evening air. Emily adjusted her dress nervously backstage, fingers trailing along the edge of her sheet music as she tried to steady her breathing. This recital wasn't her first, but it always felt like the first, her heart racing with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Jack leaned casually against the wall nearby, his violin case slung over one shoulder. "You're going to be great," he said, his voice calm and steady. It was the kind of reassurance Emily had come to rely on. "I know," Emily replied, her lips quivering into a smile, though her hands betrayed her by trembling slightly. She glanced at him, finding comfort in his familiar presence. His easy confidence had always been an anchor for her, a constant amid the chaos of her thoughts. "You've practiced enough to play this piece in your sleep," Jack added, his green eyes twinkling. "Besides, who's going to notice a mistake? They'll all be too busy being mesmerized." Emily laughed softly, the tension in her shoulders easing. "Thanks for the pep talk. It helps, a little." "Any time," Jack said, his expression shifting briefly as if he wanted to say more. But before he could, the stage manager appeared, signaling Emily to take her place. The grand piano gleamed under the spotlight as Emily walked onto the stage, the applause washing over her like a warm wave. She bowed, her eyes scanning the crowd. Familiar faces filled the front rows, a testament to the supportive community she had grown up in. And then her gaze snagged on someone unfamiliar. In the middle row sat a young man, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her pause. His sharp features and brooding presence stood out among the cheerful audience. Despite herself, Emily feels drawn to this enigmatic stranger. For a fleeting moment, she felt a pang of unease, but she quickly dismissed it, focusing instead on the piano before her. As her fingers danced across the keys, the music filled the hall, rich and evocative. Each note carried her emotions, her passion, and the unspoken tension she felt in her relationship with Jack. Backstage, Jack watched from the wings, his chest tightening as he observed Emily. She was radiant under the lights, her every movement a testament to her dedication and artistry. Yet, tonight, he noticed something different, a flicker of distraction in her expression as she glanced at the audience. When the performance ended, Emily returned backstage to a flurry of congratulations. Jack handed her a bottle of water, his brow furrowed slightly. "You seemed distracted out there. Is everything okay?" Emily hesitated, then nodded.
"Yeah."
"It's nothing. Just someone in the audience caught my eye, that's all." Jack's smile faltered. "Someone?" Emily laughed softly, brushing off his concern. "Forget it. I'm just being silly." The post-recital reception was held in the hall's foyer, a lively affair with music enthusiasts mingling over glasses of punch. Emily stood near a corner, chatting with a group of well-wishers, when she felt a presence behind her. Turning, she found herself face-to-face with the young man from the audience. "Emily, right?" he said, his voice smooth and measured. "That was a beautiful performance, but I find it lacking something." "Thank you," I guess. Emily replied, surprised by his directness. Up close, his intense gaze was even more disconcerting. She thought, well, he is not wrong about lacking something. I'm Alex, he introduced himself, breaking her thoughts and offering a hand. I just moved to town. Emily shook his hand, noting the coolness of his touch. Welcome to Ashwick. It's not every day we get new faces around here. Well, Ashwick seemed like the perfect place to start fresh, Alex said with a faint smile. Jack approached them, his expression carefully neutral as he joined the conversation. Emily, they're asking for you over by the piano, he said, his tone polite but firm. Oh, right, Emily said, glancing between the two men. It was nice meeting you, Alex. Alex inclined his head. Likewise. As Emily walked away, Jack turned to Alex, his jaw tightening. I don't know what you're looking for here, but don't get too comfortable. Alex's smile didn't falter. I'm just here to enjoy the music. Is that a problem? Jack didn't respond, but his unease grew as he watched Alex disappear into the crowd. Later that night, Emily returned home, her thoughts still lingering on the recital and her brief interaction with Alex. She set her sheet music on the piano, her fingers tracing the familiar notes. As she turned to leave, a glint caught her eye. Leaning closer, she saw faint scratches etched into the polished wood of the piano's surface, random lines that, on closer inspection, formed dissonant notes. A chill ran down her spine. Frowning, she grabbed a notepad and copied the marks, her pulse quickening. Has someone tampered with her piano? If so, why? Emily stared at the notes for a long moment, unease settling in her chest. Something about them felt wrong. She resolved to bring it up with Jack the next day. For now, she tried to push the unsettling discovery aside, focusing instead on the mystery of Alex and the inexplicable connection she felt toward him. Plus. The next morning, sunlight poured through the curtains of Emily's small, cozy living room. She sat at the piano, staring at the strange notes she had copied the night before. Her fingers hovered over the keys, tempted to play them, but an inexplicable fear held her back. Something about those notes felt ominous, as though they were meant to evoke more than just music. A knock at the door startled her, breaking her trance. She hurried to open it and found Jack standing on the porch, violin case in hand. Morning, he said with a warm smile. Thought I'd swing by before practice. You okay? You seemed a little off last night. Emily stepped aside to let him in. Come in. I need to show you something. Jack followed her to the piano, setting his case down. Emily handed him the notepad with the copied notes. These were scratched into my piano after the recital, she explained. Do they look familiar to you? Jack frowned, studying the notes. They're unusual. It doesn't follow any typical progression I've seen. Did you play them? Emily shook her head. Not yet. I don't know why, but they make me uneasy and the negative vibe I get just by looking at them. Jack chuckled softly. You're letting your imagination run wild. Maybe some kid got backstage and thought it would be funny to mess with your piano, or maybe it was the god of music. Maybe, but I am not at the level where gods would take notice of me. Emily said, though she wasn't convinced. But it's still strange, don't you think? Jack glanced at the notes again before setting the notepad aside. Geez, have more confidence in yourself. Either way, if it's bothering you that much, we can ask around and see if anyone saw something. Later that day, Emily and Jack walked through the town square, which was bustling with activity. Vendors lined the streets, selling everything from handmade crafts to freshly baked goods. The smell of cinnamon and roasted chestnuts filled the air, a comforting reminder of the town's charm. As they passed the local coffee shop, Emily's eyes caught a familiar figure seated by the window, Alex. He sat alone, a steaming cup of coffee in front of him, and an old book in his hands. Jack noticed her pause and followed her gaze, his jaw tightening. "Looks like your new friend is making himself at home." Emily frowned. "He's not my friend, Jack. I barely know him." "Good," Jack said firmly. "Let's keep it that way." Emily sighed, her patience thinning. "Why are you so against him? He hasn't done anything wrong." "I don't know why, but like your feeling from the notepad, I have the same for him," Jack admitted. "Something about him doesn't sit right with me." "Call it instinct." Emily shook her head, deciding not to argue. Instead, she changed the subject. "Let's stop by the music shop. I need new strings for the piano." As the afternoon waned, Emily found herself walking home alone, a bag of supplies tucked under her arm. She had offered to let Jack head home early, sensing his growing frustration. The streets were quieter now, the hustle of the day giving way to the calm of the evening. As she turned a corner, a figure stepped out of the shadows. "Emily," Alex said, his voice low and steady. She stopped, startled. "Alex? What are you doing here?" "Sorry if I scared you," he said, stepping closer. "I just wanted to apologize if I came off too strong last night." Emily hesitated, unsure how to respond. "It's fine. I was just surprised, that's all." Alex studied her for a moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "You're talented. Your music. It has a way of speaking to people. Don't change the way you play." The sincerity in his tone caught her off guard. "Thank you. That means a lot." He nodded, offering a faint smile. "Take care, Emily." Before she could say anything else, Alex turned and walked away, disappearing down the dimly lit street. That night, as Emily sat at the piano, her thoughts lingered on Alex's words. Despite Jack's warnings, there was something about Alex that intrigued her, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. She looked down at the copied notes on her notepad, her curiosity overpowering her hesitation. Taking a deep breath, she placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The melody was haunting, a series of dissonant chords that seemed to echo with an unnatural resonance. As she played, a strange sensation washed over her, as if the air around her had grown heavier. Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered, and a chilling draft swept through the house. Emily stopped playing, her heart pounding. She looked around, half expecting to see someone standing in the shadows, but she was alone. Are these really the work of God, or am I hallucinating by Jack's nonsense earlier? Emily thought, shaking off the unease. She closed the piano lid and decided to call it a night. Yet as she climbed into bed, the haunting melody replayed in her mind, refusing to let her rest. Somewhere in the distance, a faint, eerie note drifted through the night, as though echoing her unease.
Akumah Audiobooks.
You are listening to This Tune of Love Isn't Quite Right. Written by Akumah and voiceover by Sara.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Chapter 2, Crescendo of Intrigue. The morning sun shone brightly over the town square, but Emily's thoughts were clouded by the events of the previous night. She couldn't shake the strange feeling that had crept into her home while playing the mysterious melody. Determined to focus on something familiar, she decided to stop by the coffee shop for her usual morning pick-me-up. The square was bustling as usual, with shopkeepers opening their doors and townsfolk exchanging cheerful greetings. Emily tried to lose herself in the routine, hoping it would settle her nerves. As she reached the coffee shop, the sight of Alex sitting at his usual corner table brought a mixture of relief and apprehension. His presence reminded her of their brief conversation the night before, and the way his words had stayed with her. "Emily," Alex greeted, looking up from his book. His gaze was intense yet warm, drawing her in. "Good morning," she replied cautiously. "Join me," he offered, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. After a brief hesitation, she nodded and sat down. "Do you always sit here?" she asked, attempting light conversation. "It's quiet," he said, his voice measured. "Good for thinking." Emily studied him, her curiosity growing. "What are you reading?" He slid the book across the table. It was an old, worn volume on music theory, filled with annotations and handwritten notes in the margins by someone who was precious to me. Was? She thought, I shouldn't pry into his personal life then. And said, "You're really into music," as she flipped through the pages of the coffee menu. "It's more than just a hobby," Alex replied. "Music has a way of revealing things about people, things they don't even realize about themselves." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. "What do you mean?" Alex leaned forward, his dark eyes locked on hers. "Every melody has a story. The way you play, the notes you choose, it all says something about you. Your fears, your desires, your memories, and your pains you suffered in life." Emily felt exposed under his gaze, as though he could see right through her. She quickly changed the subject. "So, why did you move here?" Alex leaned back, his expression unreadable. "I needed a fresh start. This town seemed peaceful." Before Emily could press further, the bell above the coffee shop door jingled, and Jack walked in. His eyes immediately landed on her and Alex, his expression hardening. "Emily," Jack said as he approached their table, his tone tight. "I didn't expect to find you here." "Jack," Emily greeted, her voice laced with an awkward cheerfulness. "I was just having a coffee with Alex." Jack's eyes flicked to Alex, his distrust evident. "Mind if I join?" Alex smirked faintly. "Of course. The more, the merrier." The tension at the table was palpable as Jack sat down. Emily fidgeted with her cup, and asked Alex to diffuse the situation. "So Alex, do you also play piano?" Hearing her question, Alex glared at her for a moment before replying bluntly, "Sorry, but not anymore." "Watch your tone over there, you jerk." Jack responded, his tone sharp. "And what brings you to our little town anyway? Are you running from something that you don't want to share?" Alex turned to face him. "I don't see why I should respond to a stranger." He gave a level response. "I mean, I don't even know your name, loudmouth." "Chill dude, it was just a joke, but remember one thing, the people in this town are really hospitable. Don't take their kindness for granted." Jack responded with a grin on his face. Emily shot Jack a warning glance, but Alex remained unfazed. "That's good to know," Alex said, standing up. "But I should be going." "It was nice talking to you, Emily." As Alex walked away, Jack turned to Emily, his frustration evident. "Why are you spending time with him?" "Jack, that was out of line, besides he's just a new guy in town," Emily said, exasperated. "Why are you acting like this all of a sudden?" "I don't trust him," Jack admitted. "There's something off about him." "I'm telling you, Emily, you should be careful." Emily sighed, not wanting to argue. "Let's just focus on practice, okay?" Later that day, Emily sat at her piano, attempting to compose a new piece. The notes flowed from her fingers, but no matter what she played, the haunting melody from the night before kept slipping in. Frustrated, she slammed her hands on the keys. A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find a delivery man holding a small envelope. "Miss Emily Carter?" the man asked. "Yes," she replied, taking the envelope. As the delivery man walked away, Emily examined the envelope. There was no return address, and the handwriting on the front was unfamiliar. She opened it to find a single sheet of paper with a cryptic message: "The music you play holds answers you've forgotten. Follow the melody to find the truth." Emily's heart raced as she read the note. Who could have sent this? And what did it mean? She stared at the paper, the weight of its words sinking in. Was it a coincidence that these notes appeared just as Alex entered her life? And he is the only one who noticed my tunes are lacking in some way which I have been desperately trying to perfect. Determined to find answers, Emily decided to confront Alex. She grabbed her coat and headed out into the evening chill, the cryptic note clutched tightly in her hand. Meanwhile, Jack was digging in Alex's past with the help of his uncle, who was on the police force. And his endeavor was fruitful. He looked at the documents in his hands. No way, as I thought he was definitely a criminal and hides his tracks pretty well. His uncle, sitting on the desk, gave a side glance. Young love sure is delusional, he thought. Listen, Jack, don't let your emotions cloud your judgment. Uncle, I know what you mean, but there are two similar cases in different towns where it happened when he was present. Don't you find it strange? Jack asked, his eyes determined. His uncle was taken aback. It does seem suspicious, to be fair, but it might also be coincidence. He thought and said, well, you have a point, but we need proof to accuse someone, not suspicion. She found Alex in the town square, leaning against a lamppost as though he had been waiting for her. You got the note, he said, his voice calm. Emily froze. You sent it? Alex nodded. I thought it might help you understand. Understand what? She demanded, her frustration boiling over. Why are you so cryptic all the time? What do you know about me? Alex's expression softened. More than you realize. Your music, it connects people together. Something that goes beyond you and me. Emily shook her head, overwhelmed. You're not making any sense. Trust me, Emily, Alex said, stepping closer. Play the melody. Follow where it leads. I think this is the part you are lacking. He looked at the sky. If it were possible, I would have loved to play with you, but I know it isn't possible, so I want you to play it for me. Before she could respond, he walked away, leaving her standing in the square, her mind spinning with questions. That night, as she sat at her piano, Emily stared at the notes from Alex. Against her better judgment, she placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The melody was hauntingly familiar. Yet it carried an undercurrent of something new, something alive. How am I sensing a sense of familiarity from this? Who really is Alex? As the notes filled the room, Emily felt a strange pull, as though the music were guiding her somewhere. A knock on the door shattered her concentration. Heart pounding, she opened it to find Jack standing there, his face pale. Emily, he said, his voice trembling. You need to come with me. Now. Jack's urgency startled Emily. She could see the unease in his eyes, the tight set of his jaw. What's wrong? She asked, clutching the doorframe. I found something, Jack said, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone to appear. Something about Alex. You need to see this. Emily hesitated. The cryptic note still lingered in her mind, and the strange pull of the melody seemed to hum in the back of her thoughts. But Jack's tone left no room for argument. He looked serious to be joking, at least I could hear him out. Let me grab my coat, she said, stepping back inside. As they walked through the quiet streets, Emily tried to pry more details from Jack. Where are we going? To the library, Jack replied curtly. I've been digging into Alex's background. There's something unsettling. Emily frowned. Jack, You're being ridiculous. He's just a guy. A guy who shows up out of nowhere, Jack interrupted, his voice sharp. A guy who knows things about you he shouldn't. Don't you think that's strange? What's so wrong about that? He is also a pianist, obviously he will know about my piano plays. Jack didn't argue any further and went towards the library. The library was eerily empty at this hour. Jack led her to a secluded corner, where a stack of old newspapers and documents waited on the table. Look at this, Jack said, pointing to an article from a neighboring town. The headline read, "Local Tragedy, Piano Prodigies Lost in Fire." Emily's stomach sank as she scanned the details. My mom. The article described a devastating school fire that claimed the lives of a renowned pianist and her students. What does this have to do with Alex? Emily asked, though the unease in her voice betrayed her doubts. He didn't answer and passed more articles. The headlines read, "A prominent businessman took his own life during a piano session." A politician took his own life after a piano session. Jack flipped to another page, this one featuring a grainy photograph. Look at the man in the background, he said, tapping the image. Emily leaned in. Her breath caught as she recognized the face, Alex, standing among the onlookers, his expression unreadable. That fire happened years ago, Jack said. Why was Alex there? And in the other two cases Alex was playing the piano. Emily shook her head, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Coincidence? Jack's voice rose. Emily, this isn't just some random guy. He knows too much about you. Don't you see? He's connected to your past. And I suspect he has come here with some ulterior motives. The weight of Jack's words settled over Emily as they left the library. She couldn't deny the strange synchronicities, but a part of her still resisted. Alex had been kind to her, intriguing, even supportive in his own enigmatic way. You can't trust him, Jack said as they walked. I'm telling you, he's dangerous. Emily stopped in her tracks. And what do you expect me to do? Just cut him out of my life? What if he really does have answers about my past? Jack's expression softened. I just don't want to see you get hurt. You're my best friend, Emily. I care about you. Her heart ached at the sincerity in his voice. She knew Jack only wanted to protect her, but she also couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward Alex. I need to figure this out on my own, she said finally. Jack sighed but nodded. Just promise me you'll be careful. Back at home, Emily couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with questions about the article, Alex's presence in the photograph at her mom's death site, and the cryptic note. She sat at her piano, fingers hovering over the keys, debating whether to play the haunting melody again. The melody seemed to echo in her mind, growing louder until she couldn't resist any longer. She began to play, letting the notes flow freely. This time, the music felt even more alive, as though it carried a message she couldn't yet decipher. As she played, a sudden noise startled her. She turned to see a shadow flicker across the window. Her pulse quickened. Hello, she called out, her voice trembling. There was no answer, but the shadow moved again, closer this time. Emily grabbed her phone and stepped cautiously toward the window. Peering outside, she saw nothing but the dark, empty street. But as she turned away, she caught a glimpse of a figure disappearing into the night, a figure that looked eerily like a woman. The next morning, Emily decided to confront Alex once and for all. She found him at his usual space in the coffee shop. She went inside. You've been watching me, she said, skipping pleasantries. Alex raised an eyebrow. Good morning to you too. Don't play coy, Emily snapped. Don't deny it, I saw the photo. Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't understand, what are you on about? She slammed the photo on the table. Why are you at my mom's death site? Mom? He murmured as the memories of the past started to fill his mind. So, you are the daughter of Mrs. Carter. He stood up from his chair, matching her eyesight. Then I have one thing to say to you. Please don't play the notes I have given you. That's all, see you later. Now what are you talking about? She questions. It's complicated. And I didn't know you were her daughter or I wouldn't have approached you. Then uncomplicated, Emily demanded. For a moment, Alex hesitated, as if weighing his options. Finally, he met her gaze. You're right. I knew your mom and she was my teacher at school. But I can't explain everything yet. There are things you're not ready to hear. He is a student of my mother, but why can't he explain? What is he hiding? Emily's thought as her frustration boiled over. Stop treating me like a child. I deserve the truth. You wouldn't get it even if I explain. That note I gave you is something precious to me and it has certain effects, that's why. Don't play it. Alex said firmly. With that, Alex walked away, leaving Emily standing, her emotions a whirlwind of anger, confusion, and a lingering sense of something deeper, something she couldn't yet name. But she knew deep down it's related to the note. He didn't seem the way Jack described him to be, but knew something about my mother's death. Emily clutched the note, her determination solidifying. She didn't know who to trust, Alex or Jack, but one thing was clear, the answers she sought lay within the music. And she was ready to follow wherever it led.
Akumah Audiobooks.
You are listening to This Tune of Love Isn't Quite Right. Written by Akumah and voiceover by Sara.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Chapter 3, A Minor in Secrets. Emily was surrounded by darkness. She ran in every direction to find light, but it was of no avail. Exhausted, she sat down, gasping for breath. But then a female voice rang in her mind. The melody leads to memories buried deep. Follow the path, and you will uncover the truth. The scene changed to the hospital, and she was in front of her mother's body. One of the women in the group whispers, she was a talented pianist, who would have thought she would die so young? Another woman chimed in, at least she saved all the children in her class. But I hear her husband left years ago. What would her daughter do now? Everyone looked towards Emily. His uncle walked towards her. Let's go home, Emily. Emily awoke with the strange message in her dreams, the cryptic note still clutched in her hand. The message played over and over in her mind like a haunting refrain. The melody leads to memories buried deep. Follow the path, and you will uncover the truth. Her first instinct was to call Jack, but their argument still lingered, and she didn't want to hear another lecture about Alex. Instead, she decided to follow the one lead she had, the melody itself. The morning air was crisp as Emily walked toward the library, where the town kept its archives. The melody seemed to hum in the back of her mind, urging her forward. If the notes truly held a clue to her past, then maybe the library would help her decipher it. Emily spent hours poring over old records and newspapers, searching for anything that could connect her mother to the mysterious melody. The librarian, a kind elderly woman named Mrs. Callahan, approached her with a curious look. Researching something specific, dear? She asked. Emily hesitated before replying, I'm looking for anything about my mother, Elizabeth Carter. Mrs. Callahan's face softened. Your mother was a brilliant pianist. I remember her performances vividly. She had a way of playing that could bring a room to tears. Emily nodded. Do you know if she ever composed her own music? The librarian frowned thoughtfully. I believe she did, though most of her compositions were never published. There were rumors of a private collection, but no one knows what happened to it after her passing. Emily's heart raced. Could the melody she kept hearing be one of her mother's lost compositions? And if it is, then the precious person in Alex's life would be my mother. I need to find out why. I'll check the archives for anything about her, Mrs. Callahan offered. Give me a moment. While the librarian searched, Emily wandered through the aisles, her fingers trailing along the dusty spines of old books. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every creak of the floorboards made her tense, but when she turned, the library was empty. Finally, Mrs. Callahan returned with a small box. "This is all I could find," she said. Inside were a few yellowed newspaper clippings and a black and white photograph of her mother sitting at a grand piano. Emily's breath caught as she noticed something in the background of the photo, a shadowy figure standing near the curtains. She squinted, bringing the photo closer. The figure was faint but unmistakable. It was Alex. Later that day, Emily decided to visit the woods near Alex's home. Something about the photograph nagged at her, and she felt compelled to confront him. As she approached the edge of the forest, the wind carried the faint sound of a piano. Her heart quickened. She followed the sound deeper into the woods, her footsteps muffled by the fallen leaves. The melody grew louder, and soon she came upon a clearing. In the center stood a dilapidated shed, its roof caved in and its windows boarded up. The music seemed to emanate from within, though no piano was visible. Emily pushed open the door, her pulse hammering in her ears. The inside of the shed was empty except for an old, weathered desk. On it lay a piece of sheet music and package luggage. The notes on the page matched the haunting melody she'd been playing. As she reached for the paper, a voice behind her made her jump. "You shouldn't be here," Alex said, his tone sharp. Emily spun around, clutching the sheet music. "Are you going somewhere?" Alex stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "It has nothing to do with you. Please leave." "I think it is," Emily shot back as she put the old photograph on the desk. "This is you, isn't it? And the melody, does it have something to do with my mother?" Alex hesitated. "Did you just say mother?" I see. So, that's the reason why I was feeling the sense of familiarity with you." He walked closer to the window then nodded. "Yes. She composed it shortly before her death for me. It's a message," she said. "Once you decipher it, you will be able to." "Never mind that, I am searching for someone to do it for me." "A message about what?" Emily demanded. Alex's jaw tightened. "How would I know until I decipher it? Anyway, you don't have to bother, I am leaving this town to search for someone else." "Leaving? Why? Why didn't he ask me?" She thought and declared. "I'll do it, Alex." "No," Alex firmly rejected it. "Enough is enough, now leave. I'm not the kind of person you think I am." Emily stared at him, her mind racing. "What do you mean by that? Don't decide my decision by yourself, it should be mine to make." Alex ran a hand through his hair, visibly struggling with his words. "Because I made a mistake that cost someone their life." The air seemed to leave Emily's lungs. You don't mean. You were there, weren't you? The fire, it wasn't an accident." Alex looked away. "No, it wasn't." "Then what happened?" she pressed. "It's complicated," Alex said, his voice pained. Emily pulled away. "I can't trust you, Alex. Not until you tell me the whole truth." "I don't want you to trust me, now leave." He pushed her out of the house and closed the door. As she left the woods, Clutching the sheet music tightly, Emily felt more confused than ever. Alex's revelations had only raised more questions. What mistake had he made? And why did her mother compose a melody for him? She knew she couldn't face this alone anymore. Reluctantly, she decided to call Jack. When he answered, his voice was cautious. "Emily? What's going on?" "I need your help," she said, her voice trembling. I think my mother's death wasn't an accident. And Alex was involved." There was a pause before Jack replied, "Meet me at the coffee shop. We'll figure this out together." For the first time in days, Emily felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever secrets lay buried in her past, she was determined to uncover them, even if it meant confronting the darkest truths. The coffee shop buzzed with the low hum of conversation as Emily slid into a booth near the back, her nerves stretched taut. She spotted Jack entering, his face clouded with concern. He approached cautiously, sitting across from her. "All right, spill. What happened?" Emily placed the sheet music on the table between them. "This note was given to me by Alex. It's a melody my mother composed, one I've been hearing in my dreams. Alex says it's a message about him." Jack's eyes darkened. "So, he finally admitted he's connected to your mom's death?" Emily nodded. "But he didn't give me details. Just said it was his fault and he is finding someone to decipher it." "Jack, I don't know what to believe anymore." Jack leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Emily, I've been looking into Alex. There's more to him than he's letting on." "What do you mean?" Jack hesitated, then pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos of old news articles. He slid it across the table. "Alex lived in a town called Brookhaven before moving here," Jack explained. "There was a death of a famous local pianist, the same year your mom died. The official report says it was an accident, but witnesses mentioned a man fitting Alex's description fleeing the scene." Emily's stomach churned as she studied the grainy photos. "You think he was behind it too?" "I don't know for sure," Jack admitted. "But it's not a coincidence that he keeps turning up wherever tragedy strikes. I believe he didn't know I was my mother's daughter." "How do you know for sure?" Jack inquired. "Emily points at the music sheet, because he told me to not play this and he is leaving the town to search for someone else to help him decipher." She leaned back on her chair. "There is definitely something he is hiding and it's related to my mother's death. He said he made a mistake, he didn't say he did it." She looked at the music sheet, and why would Mom write a melody for him when she didn't even compose her own music? Jack frowned. "Emily, don't let your mother's feelings distract you. Whether he intended or not, somehow he is responsible for her death." He stood up from his chair, his voice determined. "If he left this town we will not be able to find the truth anymore. I'm going to find my uncle and tell him about it." Emily shook her head. "No, you don't have to go that far. If he really was involved, authorities would have taken him in already." The weight of Jack's words hung heavily between them. Emily stared at the sheet music, her thoughts racing. "I don't understand," she murmured. "If he's dangerous, why would he go out of his way to warn me?" Jack leaned forward, his voice low. "Maybe he's trying to control the narrative, to keep you close so you don't dig too deep." Emily frowned. "But he's the one who told me the melody was connected to my mother. Why would he risk that if he wanted to keep me in the dark?" Jack shook his head. "That's the problem, Em. Nothing about him makes sense. He's playing some kind of game, and you're caught in the middle." Emily's hands clenched into fists. "I can't just sit here and do nothing, Jack. I need answers." "Then let's get them together," Jack said firmly. "But promise me one thing, don't go anywhere near Alex alone." Emily hesitated, then nodded. All right. What's the plan? Later that night, Emily and Jack made their way to the woods, armed with flashlights and a determination to uncover the truth. The path to Alex's cabin was eerily silent, the only sounds their footsteps crunching against the leaves and the occasional rustle of branches. As they neared the clearing, Emily whispered, "Do you really think we'll find anything here?" Jack glanced at her. "If Alex is hiding something, this is the best place to start." They approached the cabin cautiously, its weathered exterior blending with the shadows. Jack tried the door, but it was locked. "Figures," he muttered. "Let's check the perimeter." Emily followed him around the side of the cabin, her flashlight illuminating a partially hidden window. She pointed. "There." Jack boosted her up, and she peered inside. The cabin's interior was sparse, but her gaze caught on a desk covered in papers. "I see something," she whispered. Jack set her down and began examining the window frame. "Looks like it's loose." "Give me a sec." With a grunt, he pried the window open, and they climbed inside. The cabin smelled of damp wood and old books. How can someone live in a place like this? Emily's flashlight beam swept across the desk, revealing sheet music, journals, sketches, and a train ticket schedule for 3 days later. "Jack," she whispered, picking up one of the journals. The pages were filled with detailed drawings of a woman, her mother. Emily's breath hitched as she recognized the familiar features, down to the way her hair curled at the edges. "This is unsettling," Jack murmured, flipping through another journal. It's like he was obsessed with her. Emily's hands trembled as she turned the pages. The drawings gave way to written entries, recounting moments spent with her mother. One passage caught her eye. "Elizabeth's music holds the key. I must protect her legacy, no matter the cost. Even if it means..." The sentence trailed off, the rest of the page smeared as if someone had tried to erase it. "Protect her legacy?" Emily muttered. "What does that even mean?" Jack shook his head. "Whatever it is, it's not normal. We need to take this to the police." Before Emily could respond, the sound of footsteps outside froze them in place. Jack grabbed Emily's arm, pulling her toward the back of the cabin. "We need to get out of here." They slipped through the open window just as the cabin door creaked open. Emily's heart pounded as she crouched behind a tree, watching Alex step inside. Alex moved to the desk, his movements slow and deliberate. Then he paused, his head turning slightly as if sensing their presence. Emily held her breath, praying the darkness would conceal them. After what felt like an eternity, Alex turned back to the desk, gathering the papers and slipping them into a bag. He left as quietly as he had arrived. Jack exhaled shakily. That was too close. Emily nodded, her mind racing. "He's hiding something big, Jack. We need to figure out what." Jack looked at Emily's determination and thought, "I know how you feel, Emily, but after seeing this today I'm scared, or it's more like a feeling that if you discover the truth I might lose you forever." Despite his internal romantic conflict, he chose to support her. "Sure, Emily, let's uncover the whole truth."
Akumah Audiobooks.
You are listening to This Tune of Love Isn't Quite Right. Written by Akumah and voiceover by Sara.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Chapter 4, Discordant Harmonies. The historic concert hall gleamed under the soft glow of chandeliers, casting a warm, golden light on the polished wood stage. The annual candlelit concert had always been a significant event for the town, blending music and tradition into a single night of enchantment. Emily stood backstage, her hands clutching the edge of the velvet curtain. Her heart raced, but this time, it wasn't only because of the music she was about to play. Jack's voice echoed in her mind from earlier that day, "Be careful tonight. I saw Alex's name on the list of attendees, and I don't trust him anywhere near you." Emily shook her head, trying to push the thought away. She needed to focus on her performance. The hall was packed tonight, every seat taken. The atmosphere hummed with anticipation as the audience whispered among themselves, waiting for the concert to begin. From her vantage point, Emily spotted Alex seated near the middle of the room. His eyes locked on hers, intense and unreadable, as if he could sense her thoughts. Jack, on the other hand, was near the front, his arms crossed and his expression tense. The sight of both men, one a source of comfort, the other a mystery, left her feeling more unsettled than ever. The master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our annual candlelit concert. Tonight, we are honored to feature our very own Emily Carter, accompanied by the talented town orchestra. Please, sit back and enjoy the music." Applause erupted as Emily took her place at the piano. She adjusted her seat, her fingers hovering over the keys. The first piece was one she had played countless times, a beautiful sonata that never failed to captivate the audience. Yet tonight, every note felt heavier, laced with an invisible sadness. As her fingers danced across the keys, the music flowed effortlessly, filling the hall with its haunting melody. But midway through the piece, a subtle shift in the atmosphere made her falter. The air seemed colder, the candles flickering as if an unseen breeze had passed through the room. She glanced up, her gaze flickering to Alex. For the first time she noticed his expression changed. It was the expression of concern. "But why? Why are you making that type of face?" "Well, if you don't tell me yourself, I will find out myself." She looked back to her piano keys and added more sadness to her tunes. The final notes of the piece rang out, and the audience erupted into applause. Emily stood, bowing slightly before taking her seat for the next piece. But as the applause died down, a sudden, sharp dissonance pierced the air. The room fell silent as everyone turned toward the source of the sound. Emily's heart sank as she realized it was coming from her piano. A shadow, someone, or something, had struck the keys, producing a jarring, unsettling chord. A murmur spread through the crowd, and Emily's hands trembled. She leaned closer, inspecting the piano. Nothing seemed amiss, yet the dissonant sound had been undeniable. Jack was on his feet instantly, his eyes scanning the room. What's happening now? Is it Alex? As he thought crossed his mind, he turned to look at him. Alex also stood up from his seat, his expression turned from concern to scared, though his gaze seemed sharper, more focused. No, this can't be. Not like this. Not to her own daughter. He readied himself to move towards the stage, but soon the lights restored themselves. The master of ceremonies stepped forward, forcing a laugh. "It seems we've had a little technical hiccup. Please, bear with us as we resolve the issue." But Alex and Emily knew it wasn't a technical error. The sound had been deliberate, as if someone was trying to communicate or a warning of some kind. Emily looked at Alex, who was leaving the concert hall between all the commotion. "Just what are you hiding, Alex?" During the intermission, Emily retreated backstage, her thoughts a whirlwind. Jack found her moments later, his face a mixture of concern and frustration. "Emily, what happened out there?" he demanded. "I don't know," she admitted, running a hand through her hair. "It felt off. Like someone was trying to send a message." Jack's jaw tightened. "You think it was Alex?" Emily hesitated. "I don't think so. He was on his seat when that incident occurred. But somehow I think it's connected to him." Jack placed a hand on her shoulder. "Listen to me. Whatever's going on, you can't let him get inside your head. Focus on the music, and we'll figure this out later. She nodded, though her unease remained. The second half of the concert began without incident, and Emily found herself losing herself in the music once more. But as the final piece approached, a composition she had written herself, her apprehension returned. She placed the sheet music on the stand, her hands trembling slightly. The piece was deeply personal, inspired by memories of her mother. As she began to play, the melody wove through the air like a delicate thread, captivating the audience. But halfway through, the lights flickered. The chandeliers dimmed, and then, with a sudden pop, the hall was plunged into darkness. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the audience, and Emily's hands froze on the keys. A single sound broke the silence, the haunting melody from her dreams, played on an unseen piano. The notes echoed through the hall, each one sending a chill down her spine. Alex's eyes shot wide, startled as he stood up. "Mrs. Carter." Panic set in as people scrambled for their phones, using their flashlights to illuminate the room. But the light revealed nothing, no one was at the piano, and no other instrument was producing the sound. Jack's voice called out from the crowd. "Emily, are you okay?" She nodded numbly, though her heart raced. The melody continued, each note more haunting than the last. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The lights flickered back on, revealing the room in disarray. Emily looked down at her sheet music and froze. A single phrase had been carved into the paper, etched deeply into the surface. "Alex, despite the suffering and trauma you had to endure, just trust your instincts and accept all of them." She looked up. "Mom, the shadow was you all along." Seeing Jack running to her side, Emily quickly grabbed the paper in her hands to prevent Jack from seeing it. "Emily, let's get out of here. It's not safe here." The concert ended in chaos, with attendees murmuring about the eerie events. Emily gave a last glance at Alex and hurried backstage, clutching the defaced sheet music. Jack was right behind her, his face pale. "Emily, what the hell was that?" he demanded. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice determined. "I need to see Alex now." Jack's expression darkened. "Alex, why him? He's playing some kind of sick game." Emily shook her head. "It's not what you think, Jack. I know now, he will explain everything to me. I need to talk to him." Jack grabbed her arm. "No. You're not going anywhere near him. Not after this." She pulled away, her eyes blazing. "What do you think you are doing, Jack? If I want answers, I have to face him." Jack stared at her, his frustration evident. But before he could respond, a stagehand approached. "Miss Carter," the man said nervously. "There's someone waiting for you outside." He said, "It's urgent." Emily's heart sank. She didn't need to ask who it was, she already knew. The crisp night air hit Emily's face as she stepped out of the concert hall. The sound of murmured conversations from lingering attendees faded into the background as she scanned the quiet street. Alex stood a few feet away, leaning casually against a lamppost, his silhouette illuminated by its soft glow. He straightened as she approached, his intense gaze meeting hers. "I thought you'd never come out." Emily crossed her arms, clutching the carved sheet music tightly against her chest. "You have a habit of showing up at the most convenient times, don't you?" Alex smirked, though his expression remained serious. "I'd say it's more than a habit. You looked shaken there." "Do you know why?" she shot back. Alex stepped closer, his voice low. "Emily, I didn't do this." "I know," she responded. "Because I've been hearing that melody in my dreams. I've been finding broken messages in my mind." She raised the music sheet where her mom left a message for Alex. "And today I have the whole message in my hands." He hesitated, his hand twitching as though he wanted to take the sheet music but stopped himself. I don't know what you are thinking. But I can't explain it here. Let me take you somewhere. Somewhere we can talk. Jack's voice cut through the tension like a blade. She's not going anywhere with you. Both Emily and Alex turned to see Jack striding toward them, his jaw clenched and his hands balled into fists. Jack, don't, Emily pleaded, stepping between them. Don't what? Jack snapped, glaring at Alex. Let him drag you into whatever mess he's brought with him? No chance. Alex raised his hands in mock surrender. Relax. I'm not dragging her into anything. I just want to explain the whole thing to her. You call this explaining? Jack gestured toward the sheet music. You've been playing mind games with her since the moment you showed up. Emily took a deep breath, her frustration boiling over. Enough. Both of you. She turned to Jack. Stay back, this is something important to me. She turned towards Alex, her eyes narrowing. If you have answers, then give them to me. Now. Alex's gaze softened, though the weight of his expression didn't lessen. Not here. Please, trust me on this. Why should she trust you? Jack interjected. Emily held up a hand, silencing him. Jack, I appreciate your concern, but I need to do this. Jack stared at her, hurt flashing in his eyes. Emily. Please, she whispered. I'll be fine. Reluctantly, Jack stepped back, though the tension in his posture remained. If anything happens to her, I'll make sure you regret it, he warned Alex. Alex nodded, his expression unreadable. Fair enough. Alex led Emily away from the concert hall, their footsteps echoing in the empty streets. They walked in silence for a while, the town growing quieter as they moved farther from the bustling center. Finally, they arrived at an old park, its benches and paths bathed in moonlight. He stopped near a weathered gazebo and turned to face her. Do you know why you keep hearing that melody? No, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I think you do. Alex leaned against the gazebo railing, his gaze distant. It's not just a melody. It's a connection. To your mother. To her past. And to me. Emily's heart raced. What are you talking about? She was a remarkable woman, Alex said, his voice tinged with sadness. Her music, it had a way of reaching people, of leaving a mark. But it also attracted the wrong kind of attention. What kind of attention? Alex hesitated, his jaw tightening. God of sadness. I know about gods, but what that has to do with my mother? I still don't understand? Emily responded, confusion mixing with fear. Alex looked at her, his eyes burning with intensity. Her compositions had an energy, a resonance. It's hard to explain, but certain pieces could evoke things, trigger emotions, memories, even visions. That melody you keep hearing, it's one of hers. And it's tied to something she wanted to protect. Emily staggered back, her mind reeling. That's impossible. My mother was just a pianist. She was more than that, Alex said softly. And so are you. What does that mean? Alex sighed. Once Mrs. Carter told me that her daughter is blessed by God of love. He looked at her worried face, but you don't have to worry, it hasn't manifested inside you fully. Emily's hands trembled as she clutched the sheet music. This is too much for me. And not only that there are people who want to extract talent like ours for themselves, Alex said. I don't know why they need it, nor does your mom know about it, but she did warn me about them. And that is the reason why she never composed her own music. Like ours, she asked, her voice sharp. Yes, I also have the blessing of God of sadness. It manifested itself when I was still a child. Now whenever I play piano some tragedy occurs naturally. Hence the reason I don't play anymore. While Emily was processing the whole information, the sound of approaching footsteps broke the moment, and Alex's head snapped up. He grabbed Emily's arm, pulling her into the shadows of the gazebo. "Someone's here," he whispered. "Who?" Emily asked, her voice barely audible. Alex didn't answer. Instead, he motioned for her to stay quiet as the footsteps grew louder. A figure appeared at the edge of the park, pausing under a lamppost. It was Jack, his face illuminated by the golden light. His eyes scanned the area, his posture tense. "Emily," he called, his voice urgent. Emily stepped out of the shadows, relief washing over her. "Jack, what are you doing here?" "I couldn't just leave you," he said, striding toward her. His eyes flicked to Alex, narrowing. "What's going on?" Alex sighed. "We were having a private conversation." "Private or not, I'm not leaving her alone with you," Jack said firmly. Emily groaned, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "Will you stop already? This isn't about you, it's about my mother, my music, and God's or whatever." Jack frowned. "What God?" Emily hesitated, then sighed. "It's complicated. I'll explain later." Alex stepped towards Emily and took the paper from her hand, his expression resigned. "Maybe this was a mistake. I'll leave you two to figure things out." "Alex, wait," Emily began, but he was already walking away, his figure disappearing into the darkness. Jack turned to her, his expression softening. "Emily, I am sorry for intruding in your private life, but..." Emily raised her hand. "I know you are concerned for me and I'm not mad about that." Jack let out a sigh of relief. "That's good then. But still, are you sure, you okay?" She nodded, though her thoughts were a tangled mess. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Jack. Everything feels wrong." He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure this out together." As they left the park, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Alex's departure wasn't the end of the mystery, but the beginning of something far darker.
Akumah Audiobooks.
You are listening to This Tune of Love Isn't Quite Right. Written by Akumah and voiceover by Sara.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Chapter 5, The Haunting Past. The next morning, Emily sat in her room. The faint rays of sunlight streaming through her window did little to dispel the heavy sense of unease that had settled over her since last night. She traced the melody notes of her mother on the page, her fingers hovering just above the paper. The melody played in her mind again, haunting and familiar. "Emily, breakfast is ready," her uncle called from downstairs. "Coming," she replied, though her voice lacked enthusiasm. She closed the sheet music and placed it carefully in her drawer, locking it before heading down. As she reached the dining table, her uncle was reading the newspaper, and her younger cousin, Liam, was scrolling through his phone. "You look like you didn't sleep," her uncle remarked, glancing up. "I heard about yesterday, is everything okay?" "I'm fine," Emily said quickly, grabbing a piece of toast. "Just had a lot on my mind." "You're always so focused on that music of yours," Liam teased. "When are you going to write something normal, like a pop song?" Emily forced a smile. "Maybe next time." The conversation faded into the background as her mind wandered back to Alex's words. "God and the people who sought our talent. The reason why my mother hadn't composed her own music except for Alex. And she is blessed by God of love." After breakfast, Emily headed to her mother's piano in the living room. She opened the lid, her fingers trembling slightly as they hovered over the keys. She began to play, letting the melody from her dreams flow through her. The notes filled the room, their haunting beauty drawing Liam's attention. "Is that new?" he asked, leaning against the doorway. Emily stopped abruptly, startled. "What? That song you're playing? I've never heard it before." "It's something I've been working on," she lied. "Well, it's kinda creepy," Liam said with a shrug. "But it's cool, I guess." Emily nodded, not trusting herself to say more. She looked at the piano and thought, I need more information, and moreover we haven't talked about how my mother died. She waited for her uncle to leave for work and her cousin for school, then messaged Alex, "Our talk was interrupted last night. Can you come to my house now?" Few minutes later her doorbell rang. Well, that was quick. But upon opening the door, instead of Alex, Jack was standing there. "How are you doing, Emily?" "Oh, it's you." "I'm doing fine, but I have a lot on my mind." "Is that so? Okay, then, I think I should come later." "No, it's all right to come in. I have also invited Alex here." "Him again?" Jack thought and asked, "Emily, I don't mean to pry, but I think you are getting too close to him and I don't feel so good about it." "It's not like what you think." She walked inside. "Yesterday I didn't get the chance to ask about his involvement in my mom's death." Jack sat on a chair in the dining room. "So, it's like that?" "Yes," she admitted and gave a sharp glare to Jack. "But if you cause any commotion or interrupt us in any way, I'll throw you out of the house. Am I clear enough?" "Okay, I got it. I will remain silent and just listen." Emily nodded, "Good." Later Alex arrived. Emily sat near her mother's piano while Jack was silently sitting on the dining table eating fruits. Alex turned to look at Emily. "I remember that piano, it brings back memories." Emily's breath hitched. "How? I mean, you once said you were partially responsible for my mother's death." "How?" Alex walked near the piano, touching the keys. He spoke, his voice heavy with emotion. "You already know your mother was my mentor, my guide. She saw potential in me when no one else did. She taught me everything I know about music. The day before Mrs. Carter died, my mother died in the car accident, which riled up the sadness in my heart. And to calm it down, I played piano all evening to let my emotions out. I didn't realize, but at some point your mother came to check on me and heard the music I was playing." Alex walked back to the couch and sat down. "Next day I didn't go to school, but what I heard from the students, Mrs. Carter wasn't acting the way she always did. Then the tragedy took place, the fire of the music room. Even the authorities were bewildered at how the fire started. But deep down I knew, my music influenced her, and as a result of that she let her talent burst in the music room that day. Even today few of the students from our class are suffering from the sad music she played, but no one knows about it. They think it's because of the fire tragedy that they were acting this way." He looked at Emily with his teary eyes. "You see, my music is a curse. No one should listen to it." "Then why didn't you tell me everything, when you discovered I was her daughter?" Emily's voice rose, anger and confusion bubbling to the surface. "Because before asking you, I asked 2 other pianists to decipher that message for me, but somehow they both died. It would be right to say they couldn't grasp the contents of Mrs. Carter's melody." Alex said quietly. "I already lost the closest people in my life and did enough harm to your life already. I didn't want you to get involved in this." Emily took a step back, her mind spinning. "So, I also had a chance of dying while deciphering the mother's melody, and he wanted to protect me." Alex wiped his tears off and continued. "First time I saw you in a performance, I realized that you also have the blessings of God, and sooner or later they will take notice of you by the way you are playing in concerts. So, I thought why not take another chance and let you decipher Mrs. Carter's melody. But once I found out you are her daughter, I didn't want to go through with that idea. Jack immediately retorted. In short, you knowingly pushed her to the gate of death. Alex responded with a low voice. You are correct about that. I know what type of person I am. Even now I'm here explaining myself because of the respect I have for Mrs. Carter. Emily gave a sharp glare to Jack, then looked towards Alex. Apology accepted. I don't blame you for what you did. Alex's eyes brightened. Thank you for saying that. He opened his bag and gave her several worn journals, their pages filled with intricate notes, sketches, and cryptic symbols. These belong to your mother, Alex said, handing them to her. Emily opened it, her eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. The notes were detailed, describing the creation of resonance and its potential effects. She knew the risks, Alex said quietly. But she investigated the people who steal others' talent for you. Emily closed the journal, her mind reeling. Thank you for protecting these documents. Alex gave a sharp look. No worries, but I would ask you to be careful while you play the piano in public. He turned to Jack. And I trust you will protect her no matter what, right? I would have done that without you even asking me. Jack turned to look at Emily. But after listening to you, I guess this is a very serious issue, and if we are not careful it will cost Emily her very own life. Hold on a second. Emily interrupted. Why are you saying it like this? Jack picked up his bag. The message is deciphered, so I'm leaving this town. He looked at Emily. Besides, they know I have the blessings and I don't want them to notice you. What? They know about you. Surprised, Emily repeated. Alex walked close to Emily and put his right hand on her shoulder. You don't have to worry. And one more thing. I think I love you. So, I have to do what I can to protect you.
What?
Jack stood up startled. What the hell did you just say? Alex turned to Jack. I just want her to be happy, that's all. And for our next meeting, let the destiny decide. He opened the main door and left with a final word.
Goodbye. Akumah Audiobooks.
You are listening to This Tune of Love Isn't Quite Right. Written by Akumah and voiceover by Sara.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Chapter 6, The Climactic Sonata. The moon hung low over the quiet town, casting its silvery glow on the cobbled streets. Emily's heart pounded as she raced down the road with Jack. Her breaths came in gasps, not just from the exertion but from the storm raging within her. Alex was leaving. He was going to vanish like a fleeting melody, and she couldn't let that happen without conveying her own feelings for him. Emily, wait. Jack called, struggling to match her pace. You can't force him to stay if he's already made up his mind. Emily didn't stop. I have to try, Jack. I just don't feel right with the way everything ended between us. Her conflicting emotions, fear, love, and desperation, drove her forward. Alex had been a mystery from the beginning, a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. Yet, beneath the layers of sadness and secrets, she saw glimpses of a man who cared deeply, perhaps too deeply. The train station loomed ahead, its platform bathed in dim light. The sound of a distant train whistle echoed through the night. Alex stood at the edge of the platform, his silhouette stark against the cold steel of the tracks. Alex! Emily's voice rang out, halting him mid-step. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. You shouldn't be here, Alex said, his voice low, tinged with resignation. I'm leaving for your sake, Emily. For my sake, she demanded, stepping closer. You don't get to make that choice for me. I need a better explanation than that. Alex's gaze softened, but his shoulders remained tense. The explanation won't change anything. I've only brought danger into your life. You deserve better than that. Emily clenched her fists. You think leaving will protect me? That's not your decision to make. You said my mother was the only one who supported you. She wouldn't want you to run away from this. From us. Her words struck a chord in Alex, his expression faltering. He looked away, his jaw tightening. I proposed to you, Emily, because I didn't want to leave behind any regrets, but for the looks of it I guess I was wrong. My blessing, it's a curse. The god of sadness has bound me to a life where everyone I care about suffers. I won't let that happen to you. Emily's voice softened. You're not the only one with a blessing, Alex. I have the god of love's gift. Together, we can balance each other out. Please, let me help you. He shook his head. It's not that simple. Then let me prove it to you, she said firmly. Play the piano with me. Let's see what happens when our music meets. Alex hesitated, his eyes searching hers. Emily. You owe me this much, she said, her voice trembling. If you still feel like you need to leave after we play, I won't stop you. After a long moment, Alex sighed and nodded. Fine. But we'll do it my way. An isolated theater, away from anyone who could get hurt. Jack, who had been silently watching, stepped forward. Emily, this is dangerous. You don't know what could happen. I have to do this, Jack, she replied, meeting his concerned gaze. I need to prove to him that making friends is okay, and staying alone is not the answer. Despite his reservations, Jack relented. Then I'm coming with you. The abandoned theater stood on the outskirts of town, a relic of a bygone era. Its facade was cracked and weathered, with ivy creeping up its stone walls. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and the faint scent of decay. The creaking of the floorboards echoed through the empty space as the trio stepped inside. Alex led them to the stage, where Jack had arranged two grand pianos which sat side by side, their polished surfaces dulled by neglect. He gestured to one. This is where we'll play. Emily nodded and took her seat at the piano. The keys felt cool under her fingers, and she closed her eyes, taking a deep breath to steady herself. Alex sat at the other piano, his posture tense. Are you ready? Yes, Emily replied, her voice firm. Jack watched from the audience seats, his heart heavy with worry. He didn't trust Alex, but he couldn't deny the connection between him and Emily. As much as it pained him, he couldn't interfere, not yet. Emily began to play, her fingers dancing across the keys with practiced grace. A warm, bright melody filled the theater, wrapping the space in an embrace of love and hope. When Alex joined in, the atmosphere shifted. His music was somber, each note laced with a profound sadness that seemed to pull the light from the room. The contrast between their melodies was stark, creating a tension that hung in the air like a taut string. But Emily didn't falter. She listened to Alex's melody, matching his tone and weaving her own notes around his. Their music began to merge, creating a harmony that was neither bright nor dark but something entirely new. It was a melody that spoke of pain and healing, of longing and connection. Jack's breath caught as he listened. He could hear the unspoken words in their music, the emotions they couldn't voice aloud. Emily's love, Alex's regret, it was all there, laid bare in the notes. Unable to remain a passive observer, Jack retrieved his violin and joined them. His strings added another layer to the melody, one of steadfast devotion and unyielding support. Together, their music swelled, filling the theater with a symphony of emotions. For over an hour, they they played, their melodies intertwining in a dance of love, sadness, and hope. Each note was a conversation, a confession, a promise. When the final notes faded into silence, the three of them sat in stillness, the weight of their performance settling over them. Alex was the first to speak. "Thank you for that. But I still think I have to go." Emily's eyes widened. "What? After all this?" He rose from his seat, his expression resolute. "This changes nothing. My presence will only bring more harm. Jack, take care of her." Without another word, Alex turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty theater. Emily watched him go, her heart aching. She wanted to stop him, to make him stay, but she knew she couldn't. Jack stepped beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Emily, he made his choice. Now it's up to us to figure out what comes next." She nodded, though her gaze remained fixed on the door Alex had disappeared through. The storm was far from over, but she wasn't ready to give up. As they left the theater, the weight of Alex's departure hung heavy in the air. But beneath it was a spark of determination, one that would guide Emily through the trials to come. The walk back from the theater was steeped in silence. Emily's footsteps dragged on the cobblestones, her mind replaying the symphony they had just created. Each note lingered in her chest, as though the music had etched itself into her soul. She clutched her arms tightly, fighting the ache Alex had left behind. Jack walked beside her, glancing her way every so often. He wanted to comfort her but didn't know how to bridge the gap that Alex's departure had created. The quiet between them was filled with unspoken tension, an invisible line they were both afraid to cross. Finally, Jack broke the silence. "Emily," he said softly, his voice steady but tinged with hesitation, "are you going to be okay?" Emily stopped in her tracks and turned to face him. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice trembling. "It feels like I just lost something important. And the worst part is, I don't even know if I could have stopped him." Jack frowned, his expression darkening. "He thinks leaving is the right thing to do. But you saw what we did there. That music, it wasn't just sadness, or love, or loyalty. It was all of it. Together. That's proof you and Alex can balance each other out." Emily lowered her gaze. "Then why does it feel like I couldn't reach him? Like my feelings weren't enough? Is it because I don't feel the same way as Alex? I think his love overpowered my own feelings." Jack hesitated. The word love hung heavy in the air between them. He clenched his fists, willing himself to speak. "Maybe he's too afraid to trust himself." "That doesn't mean your feelings are wrong, Emily." Her eyes met his, brimming with confusion. "Jack, how can you be so sure?" He let out a quiet sigh. "Because I know what it's like to love someone so deeply, you'd do anything to protect them. Even if it means stepping aside." Emily's breath caught at the weight of his words. "Jack." He offered her a small, bittersweet smile. "You don't have to say anything. I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." Her heart ached anew, torn between the two men who had become so important to her. Alex, with his haunting sadness and selfless devotion, and Jack, with his unwavering support and quiet love. Later that evening, Jack returned to his apartment, his thoughts heavy with worry. He pulled out the small notebook where he had been keeping track of clues and notes about the people who steal others' talent after Emily shared the information Alex gave her. He noticed a letter on his desk. "It's from my uncle." He opened it and found a bunch of photographs with multiple documents about those people. So, they are called resonators. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but the picture they painted was terrifying. The resonators weren't just experimenting on blessed individuals, they were stealing their powers outright, transforming them into weapons of unimaginable destruction. As he flipped through the documents, a detail leaped out at him, a name connected to the black market dealings of the resonators. Jack's stomach churned. If what he suspected was true, Emily was in far greater danger than he had initially feared. Meanwhile, Emily sat in her bedroom, staring at the piano her mother had left behind years ago. She hesitated before placing her hands on the keys. Her fingers hovered, uncertain, before pressing down. A gentle melody filled the room, carrying the soft warmth of her emotions. But this time, it wasn't the same. The tune faltered as her mind wandered to Alex and Jack. She could still hear their music, so different from hers yet intertwined in a way that felt destined. Her chest tightened as the memory of their performance replayed in her mind. I guess love triangles really do exist in real life. And now I know how the protagonist felt in the romance novel. Emily stood abruptly, unable to bear the flood of emotions. She needed clarity, and she wasn't going to find it sitting alone in her room. The next morning, Jack showed up at Emily's doorstep, his expression grim. "We need to talk," he said. Emily frowned. "What's wrong?" Jack hesitated before pulling out his notebook and flipping to the most recent entries. "I've been researching the people that Alex talked about. They are called resonators. And I found something. Something bad." He laid the notebook on the table, pointing to a scrawled name and a series of dates. "This is a timeline of their activities. Every time a blessed individual goes missing, they resurface weeks later, but changed. Their abilities are gone, and they're broken." Emily's stomach turned. "You think they're extracting their powers?" Jack nodded grimly. "It's worse than that. They're weaponizing them. And if the resonators find out about you, your blessing, they'll come for you, Emily." A chill ran down her spine. "Then we have to stop them. We can't just sit here and wait for them to find us." Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze steady. "I agree. But first, we need to figure out how to use the power you have. Right now, it hasn't even manifested in you. Besides, you don't even know the full extent of it. If we're going to stand a chance against the resonators, you need to learn how to control it." Emily nodded, determination hardening her resolve. "I'll do whatever it takes. But I can't do it alone." Jack smiled faintly. "You won't have to." Over the following weeks, Emily and Jack began working together to uncover the depths of her blessing. Every day, she pushed herself to master her abilities, experimenting with different melodies and techniques. At first, it was exhausting, both physically and emotionally. But as time went on, Emily began to notice a change. The music she played didn't just carry her emotions, it amplified them, shaping the atmosphere around her in ways she never thought possible. One evening, as she played a particularly challenging piece, a faint shimmer of light appeared in the air around her. Jack's eyes widened as he watched. "Emily, you're doing it. You're controlling the energy," he said in awe. She paused, her fingers trembling. "This is only the beginning, isn't it?" Jack nodded. "We still have a long way to go. But we're making progress." Despite the progress, the shadow of Alex's departure loomed over them. Emily often found herself thinking about him, wondering where he was, whether he was safe, and if he was still playing the piano somewhere, creating music filled with the echoes of his sadness. But she was certain of one thing: if she was really in danger, Alex would come back, and with the support of Jack they would overcome whatever lies ahead. But she couldn't let herself dwell on the past. The storm was coming, and she needed to be ready. As she looked at the piano before her, Emily took a deep breath. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: she wouldn't back down. Not now. Not ever. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. A melody of hope, resilience, and quiet strength filled the room, carrying her forward into the unknown. End of part 1.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Thank you for listening to Akumah Audiobooks. For more stories from us, refer to channel playlist and stay tuned for our next update by clicking the subscribe button. Have a good day.